Hello, everybody. Welcome to another F.L.O.W Presents. I am so excited to be here and to be your host for today. So if this is your first time joining us, or if you haven't joined us in the past couple of weeks, we have been talking about mental health and this series on Triggered. The series on mental health and the subject area Triggered. So with me today, we have some familiar faces. They were here last week. Maybe I'm just the new face. So we have none other than Rob. Rob, you can introduce yourself. Everybody knows Rob. We have, and I'm Liv. She's a regular here now. And we also have Natalia. Thank you so much for joining us again. I'm excited to be here and to dive into the topic of mental health. So also, if you're joining us here on Facebook or YouTube, please put your comments in the chat box below if you have any questions or just sharing your experience. We would love to hear it. We want to comment on it too. Share your experiences with us. So let's get started and kind of jump into the topic of mental health and seeking therapy. So just by a raise of hands, who here has actually been to therapy and gone through the process of therapy, and what has your experience been? Raise your hand, everybody. Okay, so you can jump in. Who wants to go ahead and kind of talk about their experiences and what that has been like for them?
It's me, Liv again. So for me, I have and still continue to do therapy. And as I said, I had to find the right fit for myself because at the time when I would say my first therapy session happened in college, and the experience I had the first time was horrible. The person was not compassionate. They were smirking at me, crying, and just all sorts of nonsense where I almost never went back. But the second time I went back, because I was determined to find the right fit in college, I found this Caribbean woman, and it was exactly what I needed because I felt like I was going crazy. And she's like, no, you're not going crazy. You have feelings. And obviously, some people don't understand culturally or where you're coming from with certain things. And so for me, going forward in my life, I did seek out therapy, especially when I was in the military and I felt some triggers come on. And I think that's why I'm a very big advocate for people finding the right therapist for them. If the first one doesn't work out, be willing to seek out somebody who is willing to be your partner in the situation with you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't, that's comment right there. Be willing to be with a partner who's willing to engage in the process with you. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Snaps. That's real, right? That's real. That's all I want. That's real. That's all I got. Go ahead, Atilia.
So my experience was actually my first, kind of more the first time I was consistently going. I went once before, but in college was what I wanted to pursue. And it was encouraged that if we wanted to be in this particular field, you should at least go to counseling at least once. So you understand what it's like to be on the other side. And so I did. And for me, I found I had a really great counselor. The only reason why I stopped was because she left really. If she was still there, I definitely would have. She was great, great listening ear, and just gave that a safe spot that I felt that I could share. And one of the things I loved about her, because of the type of community I went to school in, and because it was such a small city, she even went ahead and said, look, and I think most therapists really do this, but she said, look, because it's such a small community, if you don't want me to acknowledge you when you're out and about, that is perfectly fine. If you want to play off how you know me, that is perfectly fine. If you want to just be like, oh, we just met around the way, as opposed to just admitting like, well, yes, this is my counselor, because she understood, I think just in, especially the Black community, how it can be one of those like, why are you going to counseling? You have good sense, like just suck it up and keep it moving. Or especially in the church, it's like, all you need to do is pray to God and keep it moving. And so she gave that
That's
room.
not true. That's not true.
Drink tea and we're better. Pray.
Yeah, tea covers all things. Sorry,
So I love the fact that she said that. And even as I changed roles, and for me, I had to send people to counseling. Having been on that side, I could kind of tell them what to expect and encourage them to do it, that I'm not just saying it for saying it. It's because I've also done it. So.
Yeah, I want to speak on the other end now, really, as a therapist, like practicing. I've been a part of group therapy. I also did pre-engagement therapy. And I also had a supervisor when I realized like that was like therapy. But it definitely is something to go through the process with someone else on the other side. And you both, like Emily and Natalia, you guys talked about things that's like, I told I probably lost a client in a way. Because she called and she was like, hey, so tell me how this works and et cetera. We're just like doing, consult. And I was like, look, here's the thing. If you don't like me, then don't stay. Right. And there was no malice. There was no hurt. It was just like, because Anne said it, like, if you can't engage, like you have to tell this person all things about yourself, right? Good, bad, ugly, and in between. And if you can't do that, then we're not really engaged in the process of therapy. Like we're not going through that. And it's so real. And then Natalia, you bring in this idea of like, if you drink tea, pray it away type thing. Like, it's not enough. Okay, it's not enough. Let me just keep my mouth shut.
No, but it's
I hear what you guys are saying in terms of like some of the potential like barriers of with culturally, and it could be within different facets. Like talk about some of the barriers and what those look like in our real lives, in whether it's culturally or in our churches, when it comes on to mental health or seeking therapy, what some of the challenges that we face, and actually, even though you guys touch on it a little bit, but just highlighting some of those barriers.
I think one of the ones that I've come across is just even going in the first place. One is getting up the chutzpah, so to speak, to go. And then also, how do you want to share that with somebody else? Like, do you tell your inner circle or don't you? And even whether it be work or school, depending on if you don't feel comfortable saying that yet, but the cover up, like, you're at work and you have to take that time off to go, oh, what do you go? Oh, a doctor's appointment, like those types, especially in the community, because one, in general, you don't want everyone in your business, but even just to be able to say, you know what, you cover it, I'm going to a doctor's appointment. Oh, really? Is everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine. And how consistently are you going to this doctor's appointment? It might raise red flags. In addition to, I think on the flip side, if you're still a student, that might be its own thing. And then even for some of the persons that I worked with, explaining to their parents as to why they need to go to counseling, or if they're still teenagers and they're on their parents' insurance, and they're like, I can use my parents' insurance and I can cover the copay or whatever. But when my parents get the bill, they're going to be like, why is Jennifer going to counseling in in that phone call? And some of the things that you're discussing are the things about your parents, but how do you navigate those dynamics? And so even for me as a residential and assistant director, trying to find other ways that it doesn't come up on the parents' insurance, because they're not in that space to have that conversation, but give them the resources to get what they need to get. So I think one is just the whole concept of why are you going to counseling, and trying to deal with saying that. And then I think Amleth touched on it, and it's something I've seen, is finding someone that you trust and feel comfortable with, because essentially you're sharing all that baggage that no one else, you don't let anyone else into, you know, your closet. You're literally opening up and pulling out some of your skeletons in order to kind of go through that healing process. And if you do not feel comfortable sharing that with anyone, with the person you've chosen, then it's kind of like a waste of, in my opinion, a waste of time, because you're never going to get to the nitty gritty, because you're always wondering, is this person, you know, gentle? Is there, you're never going to share that. So
you talking about barriers. One of the barriers I see is like right now. Like, so we do this, we're young adults, and F.L.O.W is a young adult team. Like, you want to talk about everything. Some of our lowest numbers could be any number of things. People could be going out at sunset, but I also think it's not a topic we talk about. Like, we just don't talk about mental health. You don't. My first inkling of mental health, and if I think back, I'm not gonna call it the church, it was in New York, and somebody starts praising too much, right? Someone starts displaying a little bit too much energy, and you see those two deacons come up and stand real close with their hand on the shoulder. Like, think about what we're communicating to the community at large. Like, the moment you start doing something different, simmer down. You're doing a little too much. You're a little too excited in this space. Well, mental health, like the displays of some mental health conditions, is downright different. I think it's downright off. And I think about that already being a barrier. This idea of, if you admit to something being off, you can't really, you don't fit in. Like, you'll be ostracized, you'll be put out, or you'll be highlighted so much so that you'll feel even smaller within yourself. And so it's hard to want to go to engage in a process that where you're admitting that something's different in me.
Yes.
And so we barely do it for doctors. Let's keep it honest. Like, as a person who is Caribbean American, I think that's the appropriate term for me to use, right? We already don't like going to the doctor. I think Alexia said it the first time, right? If you got gas, drink tea. If you got a headache, drink tea, right? If you broke a bone, drink tea. You know what I'm saying? Like, tea solves it all. And then, first of all, you can do regular tea, but then you need ginger tea. If it's really bad, you got to do ginger tea, because then you're cured from the spirit out. But you don't go to a doctor.
No.
So if you're not gonna go to a doctor for like broken ligaments and sores and pains, how are you gonna go to a doctor to describe the thing that you can't necessarily put your finger on, but you know you're off, right? So I think one of the biggest barriers is our lack of attention to it, like the lack of like drawing attention to how you can feel off. That's my thought.
Whew, you guys said a lot. I had to write down a couple of these things. Well, one thing that triggered me why I felt it was very important. I remember when I was like around 17, 18, I probably was younger, maybe 16, in my mom's church. It was an Episcopal church. And one of these large families in the church, one of their little brothers got sick, and he was around my age. He had cancer. And his eldest brother, I remember, you know, I hadn't seen him in church for a while. And when he came in, he was having a mental breakdown. And the way the church members treated him made me just emotional. And I started crying and asking my mother, who's a therapist, like, why would they treat him like that? What is wrong with them? Do they not see that he's hurting? Like, something is really wrong with the church if we're kicking people like that out, you know? And my mother, she realized that it really did affect me, not in a way where it triggered me in a bad way, but it affected me where I wanted to help or find a way that the church could be a little bit more compassionate when it came to people like that. And even when I came to the Adventist church, I noticed that they still don't have the protocols in place to help those who may go through a mental breakdown in the middle of service or at a community event, you know? And these are not just strangers that came into the church. These are like members of the church that they can't help or assist. And, you know, it has to be like a marriage between a therapist and a pastor to have, you know, sit down and have a conversation to find and figure out, okay, how to help the community, right, together. That if I see someone, you know, can I refer them to you? Or I'm Rob. Look, I'm trying to help out our
No,
community.
no. See, when you said pastor, I got triggered. I'm gonna be honest. This is the
Go ahead. Go ahead.
well, because my thing is and this is somebody who feels the call is pulling his life to a different direction.
Right.
But I have an issue because I think pastors have given some therapists bad names. Keep it real. Know if you're a pastor called by God, anointed by the Spirit to talk on spiritual things. I'm gonna be real. I'm gonna try to follow me on my track here, y'all. I'm gonna be a little crazy. You may not be capable of speaking on clinical mental things. Now, all things clinically and mentally are of the Spirit. Now, I just want, because the Spirit can move in a lot of different ways. So the Spirit may move you to give you knowledge to do those things, but not always. Mm-hmm. These things aren't the same. So some pastors will come in and say, oh, I'll give you counseling and therapy. Nah. But they don't have the capabilities to do so. And so I think what Emily was saying, it is true. Some pastors need to know if you may receive counseling training, but the therapeutic process, right? Human life development, how certain disabilities manifest themselves in people, what it looks like, human interaction, you may not be trained in that. And that's okay. Know that and then refer out accordingly. Right. Because I think a lot of people look at therapy and they think of their spiritual leaders and go, I don't like that, because you talk to some and your business out there, right? Or you're trying to go up to them about something serious and they're like, well, let's pray together. Ninja, I can't pray right now. Okay.
So let me ask you though, how do we normalize this process, right? Because it's normal for us to go to a doctor, right? To go get a regular the annual check-ins, to checkups, or whatever the case is, or if we somehow, at least for me, I'm paranoid. So a simple thing, I'm like, oh, time to call my doctor, the simple thing. So that's a part of who we are at this point in terms of going to the doctor. And we're at the space now where we don't feel obligated to explain to people why we're going to the doctor. Oh, I have a doctor's appointment. That's it. If I feel the need to elaborate on that to you, because I may need prayer from you or something, or whatever the case is, that's where it stops, right? But I don't feel some sort of obligation to say to you, here's why I'm going to the doctor, right? I'm going there to get this particular checkup or this particular test, or whatever the case is. How do we normalize this idea of just going to, because it's not just going when you actually see a physical, like a manifestation of and I think I want to get us out of that idea of like going there when it's gone bad, right? Even though you go there when it's gone bad, but how do we normalize it as a part of our life? How do we normalize the conversation? And how do we normalize it to a point where we're not even relying on pastors necessarily, but a member in the congregation may see, or a friend may see something, and it's like, you know what, I may need to have a conversation with this person and not feel triggered or threatened, or just maybe caught off guard if somebody brings that conversation up to us. How do we normalize this particular process?
I think one of those is simply just having that conversation more and more. Just like how, if we're going to talk about the church, those same avenues that we talk about, hey, you need to get breast cancer screening, you know what I mean? That would have been taboo years ago. Now it's not unpopular to have.
You said breast.
Exactly. It's not unpopular to have those events at church where you have the breast and it's like, okay, well, you need to touch it and you need to become comfortable with what this is supposed to feel like. Or even in the church when it comes to prostate cancer, and those conversations are now being had because it's become so popular. I think it goes back to the more awareness that people get, the more persons who are willing to have these conversations, to say, hey, you see me doing all these different things and it's great and it's amazing and you love it, but I've had to get help in order to get to this next level of whether it's professional or with my family. We had to take, so I realized that there were certain moves that I was making that weren't beneficial to my overall goal. So sitting with someone on a one-on-one to help me go to that next level. And of course, God is important, don't get me wrong, but God also provides us with people to help us to the next step. How do we come, if we're going to say, okay, you want to become vegetarian, what do? You start reading books, you start being in those environments, you learn about products, you learn about foods, and it's the same thing. It's like, okay, I realize there's something here that I need to work on. I realize I have diabetes, I have cancer, I have this. What are the steps that I can do to improve whatever this process is? And it's having those, I think those more and more of those conversations. I might be biased, but I think now in the last maybe 5 years, we're having more of those conversations in the Black community than I think it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Why?
I'm sorry?
I was going to say, you know why?
Because we're having certain issues that we're talking about more.
So if you can let me jump in with what you were saying, you mentioned breast cancer, you mentioned prostate cancer, things that are killing us at high numbers. And so we're seeing the impact. Yeah. We're now starting to see the impact of the trauma that we've experienced, and right. we can't solve all of them with prayer.
No, we can't.
And so we're trying to figure out what happened. Well, your mother, who didn't let you sit on the couch, had to wrap it in plastic, right? Had to make sure everything on the counter was in a certain way, had to make sure that you dressed and look a certain way, that you couldn't move certain things. Well, she was suffering with a type of anxiety that was most likely obsessive compulsive disorder, which most likely led her to feel out of control, because maybe at some point in her life, she lacked that control and she's desperately grasping to have it back. And now you are out here doing the same thing and you don't know why. Oh, boo, you got anxiety. That's what that is, okay?
Because for a long time, just to real quick, a long time clinicians have been like shouting this to the world, right? And it's kind of been like, all right, here goes the shrink talking about whatever. Here goes that, you know, with those kind of, and not necessarily, you know, taking it seriously because it didn't manifest at that particular time. So now when everything is, you know, everything is just like magnified with social media, and now shoot, COVID, you know, you can't ignore the signs and the symptoms, and you can't ignore the brokenness, you know.
Depression, right? We see what that looks like in our community now. Okay. For among men, it looks like the functional alcoholic.
Yeah.
Among women, it's the lack of interest mother doing all that she needs to do, right? I think here's to my sisters. Your resilience has unfortunately been a detriment at times, because you are able to go through life literally burdened by things.
Yeah.
But you might be depressed. Mm-hmm. Eating disorders for some of us. They work out all the time. Yes, because if they don't, they will crash and they will burn. Mm-hmm. So like, how do we talk about this? Alexia, you asked us. We need to start drawing the lines between, that's what that is. That's like, as a community, the trauma that we're experiencing. As a community, as a Black people, like this idea of, you know, you're always trying to know when to code switch. You gotta be, and I shout out, I know some people in the chat are probably gonna jump on this, but you know, if you're African American, you code switch between being your Black self and being your accepted Black self. But if you're Caribbean American, now you go from being code switching from Black, sometimes being Caribbean and Black, to being acceptable, right? There are layers there, now not to dissuade any other's experience, that is now an added layer of functioning that you have to do, because as a Caribbean, you don't necessarily fit in with Black Americans because you don't have their same struggles, how they experience it here. And so you may have to code switch when with them, then you got to code switch when you're with whites, then you got to code switch when you're with Blacks. Like, that's a lot to manage.
Right. I would like to agree with all of that. And for me, I, you know, just like Natalia was pointing out, prevention, you know, adding the mental health checkups as prevention added with the physical checkups is just as important. And I think I know that the VA, they're trying to do something similar like that right now. They're trying to start a new program where they are trying to have the mind, body, and the soul all entwined together. And so, you know, it's not just people trying to pray it away. And, you know, in the military, they do the same thing like the church does because they're structured like that. And they're realizing it's bigger than just a need for just God. And not saying God is not enough. It's just that we have been under a lot of stressors in our community that do trigger not just post-slavery trauma or intergenerational trauma and the multi-traumas and everything. We have so many layers of trauma that we haven't even scratched the surface of any of it. And when they do act out, I think we get misdiagnosed in so many ways that, as I said, if we don't start talking about it and telling people, hey, you're not acting crazy, like something is going on and we really need to sit down and talk about it, versus, oh, just breathe. Because I've been told by my aunts before, oh, you're just having a little anxiety. You just need to breathe more. Take more deep breaths in and relax. Take more naps. I mean, I already took naps, but but still, it was deeper than that. It was something that I needed to go deeper with someone else to uncover and peel back those multi layers of, let's get to the root of why this is happening to me, or why this keeps coming back up for me, rather than just the cultural, spiritual only of dealing with the situation.
Can I jump in, Alexia, before you think? Because what Amla said about getting to the root of it, I guess I'm speaking biased, and I think a lot of us are, but with good reason. Some of these things are encoded in our DNA. Let me start from the very, very root. Like some of the things that you're triggered by, you had nothing to do with.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with. Again, wonderful book. I'll put it out there. The Body Keeps Score. Please check it out. And how our God is so amazing in this capacity. Let me just praise on him a little bit, because our brains are wired to do amazing things, and we're not even using all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are things, you talk about generational curses, there are things that your parents have gone through that their brain has encoded within themselves, that now you are born with, and you're trying to find out, like, why do I have this propensity to do this? Like, it's in you. And that's not even all of it, right? That's something hard to gather. Just talk about the things that you see in your youth and you try to figure out, how do I cope with this? Again, you talk about the mother who was always controlling, or the father who was always yelling, or the parents that were separated. These things influence you. The parents that never kiss and never touch each other. You try to figure out why in your relationship you can't hug nobody. Well, boo, let me tell you a little something. You didn't see it. Like, you did not see it. And if you didn't see it, right, you can't address it. Now your boyfriend or partner or whomever brings it up to you, and you get, oh, well, what you mean? I just don't like to touch. Those are two reasons alone right there to say, maybe I need to talk to somebody else, right? Somebody who can help me work through these things that I feel. The uncomfortable time that you get touched by someone, you don't know why your body shivers. Our bodies also can repress things.
Yeah.
So you may have gone through something, and your brain has chosen to forget it, and that touch reminded you of it. But you play it off, and like Amla says, because somebody's like, just relax, you just breathe through it, pray on it. And that to me is the Holy Spirit telling you, no, this is time. We're at a place now where we might be able to address this. That's why I'm allowing it to come to your remembrance, but instead we laugh it off.
That's true. So let me ask a question in terms of that, and in terms of kind of the responses that we do get from the older generation. How do we handle, do we even at this point still try to educate them on the process, or are we at a point, and this is just a view from like our generation, are we at a point where we're just like, yeah, it's just a done deal, we're just going to try to figure it out for ourselves? Do we still try to kind of get them to understand the severity of the situation? Because sometimes, even in our process, sometimes we may feel like we still need them to get what we're saying about the magnitude of the situation to get healing. How do we move on from that one if they're still just kind of like, go just drink some tea or just breathe, like Emily said, breathe? Do we still try, or do we just move on?
I think it depends on where that person is individually. Mm-hmm. Because if you're already fighting the setup of, do I even go to counseling, and how, if you don't feel comfortable sharing that, I don't think, like I said, just my opinion, I don't think that's the space that you want to be in to have that. I think getting your grounding first, finding the right counselor, being comfortable with going until you feel in that space that you can handle that, depending on who you're choosing to have that conversation with, because the kickback can be harsh. If they are very adamant, like, you just need to read this, or you just need to go here, if you're not in that space to take that hit, it can bring you further than, couple steps behind where you were. And so I think taking care of yourself first is where you start off. Like a friend of mine likes to say, the rules of the airplane apply. Put the mask on yourself first before assisting others. And it's something that I always have to remind myself of. So in this particular situation, you're trying to get help for yourself. You cannot give oxygen to someone else if you're here dying, because you're going to die and they're going to be completely fine, and keep it moving. But if you get that, and you've gotten enough, then now you can turn and say, hey, this is something I think you need. And if they choose that they don't want it, then that's fine. But initially, I think just getting yourself good and working out whatever things you've chosen to go to counseling for. And then if you're in that space, to come back and go, hey, this is what I think. And you would have to start with small things depending on the person that you're dealing with. Because if this person is like completely resistant to counseling, completely thinking I've done everything that is right, and God forbid it's your parents, and there's some significant things in your growing up that you're like, hey mom, I don't think you did this right, or dad, I don't think, the backlash can be very, I've seen it for other people where it's like, what do you mean I didn't do this right? I did what I needed to do to keep food on the table. You have a roof over your head, you were healthy, you were safe. Why are you coming to me with, oh, these other stuff? No, suck it up and keep it moving. But I think when you get to a good spot and you've worked through some of your things, and they can see that you've gotten healthier, that how you choose to handle things that would have caused you to go completely left field is now like, okay, it happened. I can't control that. This is what I can control. That's when they come and talk to you. And that goes about anything. When you start working out, people are like, what? Why are you working out? And when you get the body that you want, oh my gosh, how did you get to this point? So
I would say it's two parts for me where first, if the person's not willing to go below the surface with you and they just want to continue to have a surface level relationship, you have to love them from a distance. That's what I figured with a lot of my aunts and uncles, because I come from a very large family. And that was one of my aunts that told me the whole breathing thing. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna love you from a distance. I'm gonna forgive you and love you from a distance because you don't have the tools I need to move forward from this stage in my life or from this thing in my life at the moment. And second, I sat my parents down, whether they wanted to hear it or not, and had a real deep conversation with them. And I told them, look, I'm not backing you in a corner. I just need you to hear me, hear what I have to say. And I just want to know, are you skilled enough to help me through this process, or are you able to support me through this process? That's it. I just need to know if I have your support or not, If it's too much information, let me know. If there's something triggering, let me know, and I think it's helped our relationship to go a little deeper where I can trust my parents more with those information, because I've never been able to talk to my parents on that level. And it was never something that we brought up until now. Like my dad, we would talk more emotionally, and then I could tell when it's too much for him and I'll pull back. But for my mother, she was just like, I've never been through this. I don't have any, text on it, but I'm willing to listen. If she's willing to do that, I'm willing to go that far with her. If she wasn't willing, then I would still seek someone to help me with that and let them know, hey, I'm seeking someone. And they are supportive of me still seeking someone other than just not, letting them know and including them in the process, but also willing to go the distance for myself with someone else, because I can't tell my parents everything at the same time.
Rob, when you add into that, could you also add, and if anybody else want to add eventually on this, something that Natalia and Emily, you talked about is putting yourself first and what that looks like. What that looks like, right? Because it's not just, oh, I'm putting myself first, and that's what it actually looks like practically when you're putting yourself first, and barriers, healthy barriers, boundaries and things like that. So if you could.
So I'll say again, this is not a taboo topic, and we're talking about it as young adults because it's needed. Excuse me. And when you talk about what setting boundaries looks like, I'm actually remembering a very honest conversation that I had with my mom about what Natalia said. You mentioned something and they're like, well, I did the best that I can. Yes, you did, period. I am now trying to take that and do a little better. That's it, right? And taking care of yourself is recognizing that, like recognizing that the guilt that you may be experiencing is actually not your own. It's you've now introduced new information to somebody and they don't know what to do with it because it's new and it's brand new and it actually calls to light some of the things that they didn't do well, and that's okay. Right? But I want to do a little better, and so I'm gonna take care of me. I'm actually gonna put on my mask first so I can breathe. And that leads me to the second thing, is this idea of we're such interesting creatures. We don't like the uncomfortability of going through new or change, right? A lot of us, we don't. Just call it what it is. We don't like to go through the uncomfortable space. And there are a lot of other uncomfortables that we don't like silence. Many of us can't stand silence, or the uncomfortable of experiencing someone else experiencing emotion makes many of us uncomfortable, right? Many persons, not even just men, many persons don't like to see someone else cry because you feel you have to do something, right? Many persons don't like overt displays of emotions because you feel you have to do something. Well, let me highlight that in the Caribbean community, because we were raised under European influence, any display of emotion was essentially taboo. Well, why would I go to therapy when the thing that they're going to get me to do, at least in my mind, is to display my emotions? Mm-hmm. That doesn't sound like it's something I want to do. Mm-hmm. So we actually stay with the uncomfortable feelings that aren't helping us just to avoid the uncomfortable feelings that will help us. What sense does that make? And that's what I'm here to tell some people, like, therapy is going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. Like, that's, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's okay. It's okay to recognize that you don't feel all the way right and you don't know what to do with that. If it was something from your gastrointestinal tract, right? If you had a consistent pain in your leg, most of us, maybe not all, but most of us would pursue help for it, because like we don't want to stay with that uncomfortable feeling. It's no different than the one sitting inside your gut, or the thoughts ruminating inside your brain, right? Or the fact that you can't go anywhere and speak up, but you got all these thoughts in your mind. Like, come on, y'all, we got stuff going on.
It's the plug that a lot of the physical illnesses that we have, it starts,
right,
starts at the top, you know.
Making shots.
So, so we're addressing something in a way that it doesn't seem like we're trying to address it to fix or to cure, or just more so kind of alleviate the initial the pain that we're feeling right now. But a lot of the things that we experience physically, they're tied emotionally to our development. So yeah, I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying. So insightful, and this topic is so important. A lot of people are struggling with this, especially now, especially 2020. The year that everybody thought they were about to live their best lives, the year where everybody had plans on plans on plans, and then COVID happened, right? So
Miss Rona.
Rona came and said, I'm sorry, I'm going to shut this party down, right? And unfortunately, with this situation, some of us have experienced loss, whether it's family or friends, and just dealing with that grief of loss of family or friend, or loss of a job, or
loss.
Any kind of loss. Like, people have experienced it in so many different ways, and not only just loss, dealing with things that they haven't dealt with prior to COVID, right? Because we were in a space where we were just busy trying to do life, right? We filled our lives on our schedule with everything that we could possibly find, whether it's work, we're doing overtime, we're finding extracurricular activity, we're finding, the little free time that we may get, we're trying to plan a vacation to do a whole bunch of stuff. We're just going like on a hamster wheel, but we never get the time to actually sit down with ourselves and see what's that in the mirror, right?
Who does that?
Right? So 2020 has kind of done that, like forced us to do that. How has it looked? How has this, how's mental health, not just in your life and like also in your families and friends' life, in the community around you, how has it looked now? If it does look any differently than before.
I know y'all have heard the statement, I can't wait to get back to normal. Right? Like that, to me, that's the key sign of the budding thoughts of there's a potential uncomfortability you have with self. I can't wait to get back to normal. Right? So many things you can do right now, and you want to go back to the time when you were super busy. And for everyone, that's a little different, but that tells me something. Like I found, here's a little disclaimer, I am an introvert at nature. You may not believe it, but it's true. So like COVID for me, I was like, I don't gotta go to work. Here's 40 less people I have to see throughout the week. I was doing my praise dance. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I also recognize that it was hard because those were people I got to engage in different ways. I see it in the overt binge watching. I see it in the amount of clients, like, so my outside therapy, like there have been an increased number of people reaching out for therapy. Mm-hmm. You see it in how people are, the Instagram posts, the Facebook post, blah, 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 right? I think people are now finding unique ways to ignore the struggle, and they're saying that they're okay. It is the full binge watching, right? It is the, so for others, the excessive workout. Mm-hmm. It's the, now I wanna, maybe I don't party, but I'm gonna find this one person and kind of boo up with them a little bit more, right? Or the constant need for some type of attention or input in whatever way. Like we're all trying to escape from something. But when you take work off the table, you take church off the table, mercy, a little different. Look a little different.
I'm a piggyback on that one, because I do find that a lot of people who are not introverts, that they're very they're avoiding the slowdown, they're avoiding the facing their children every night, they're avoiding not being able to work all the time, or being home for some reason, or talking to certain people, So I think a lot of people, their normal was avoidance. And now when we come to the point of facing yourself and this new normal of who you are or becoming, and I think I had to face that when I was coming out of the military, where I cried because I was grieving the old me, I was grieving who I used to be before COVID. So when COVID hit, I was like, Mommy, everybody's where I was 2 years ago, And my mother was just like, wow, I never really thought about that way, So to me, it's I was always avoiding stuff. And even my therapist thought me taking too many naps was a part of my avoidance,
Hey, therapist, watch yourself. There's a fine line, okay?
That's facts, though, Rob.
She said it had to be a balance. It had to be a balance, And in everything, just like the Bible says, there has to be a balance. We have to be temperate in the things we do, And I wasn't, And so coming to this point of COVID, I do see a lot of I've been aware of a lot of abnormal behaviors in many of my family members. And to the point where when I did express that I was an introvert, they laughed at me and said, no, man, you're an extrovert. And I was like, y'all really don't know me. Right. So, because people would ask me, what am I doing today? And I said, I'm chilling. I'm in my bed. I'm in my house. It's nice and comfortable. I got food. I don't need to go anywhere. Right.
Sorry, not sorry.
Right. And you had, things to catch up on. But as I said, this was a time period for me to finally look at myself in the mirror of who I was, the new me, and to be proud of what God was blossoming, because I wasn't sure. I was afraid to look in the mirror, literally, And now looking back, I'm like, wow, this was a process. It was a painful process, but now I'm here. and how do I help others to walk through that same process at this time during COVID? And I found that I built a different community with my family members, especially the younger ones, because no one really talks to your young children in the family, your young cousins, your young teenagers, about how they felt. And to the point where I thought it was just finances that worried them, but come to find out, it's life stuff we've never been taught how to adult in our lives. It's really coming up, you know? So the conversation had to happen. And I think COVID 2020 really brought that out in tremendous ways.
So for me, I think 2020 brought out, well, it brought everything out, first of all, let's just say that. But I think one of the big things is with death, because especially if you've lost someone who's in your close-knit family and or friends, it's brought out just something very different. Whereas I think prior to when you were grieving, at least there was the funeral, there was, the repast, and then still people being able to visit you. Or even just at the funeral, being able to hug someone, and just to feel that, to be surrounded by love, and also to travel to those places. For me and my family, we've lost a couple members. For me personally, there was a cousin, their two grandparents, and both in different countries than the US. And to see that, in order to engage with the family, it was, and actually an uncle, but in order to engage with the family, I'm watching it on the screen. I can't hug, I can't engage. And I'll be honest, I come from a Caribbean family. So as much as you think you know the family, you find out that there are more family members that pop out of the woodwork. And so even not being able to go, oh, you're such and such is, and to learn and to go, okay, I have a bigger family than what I thought, that's taken away to a certain degree. And then even for those who are living with those family members, it's now you went from having 5 people in the house to now you have 4. And now you went from buying their favorite yogurt or their favorite thing, and it's just you. And whereas you could at least you are still grieving that, but you could engage with other people. Now you're limited to who's in this house, and you guys are all grieving. And just even someone else coming in and bringing some form of joy or just whatever engagement. Now everyone's hesitant on that because it's, well, do I invite someone in and they could potentially have COVID and now I'm potentially going to lose more family members? Or, there are just so many different things. The activities that you usually use to help with that grieving process, it looks very different now than it did a couple months ago. Yeah. And so that is one of those things. In addition to, of course, we talked about the financial changes that it's been, where depending on what your job is and whether you had to be let go because there was downsizing or, bills that you now have to pay. And even going back to having lost a family member, you're taking care of those financial needs. And just the dynamics that goes with that. How are you caring for your children? Because now they're homeschooling and you're still trying to work from home, and now they're making a whole lot of noise in the other room. And I don't know the new math and this new math that they're trying to teach and how I want my child to progress, but
this math, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some of it and I've gone, okay, I don't know what this is. I'm completely
lost. As long as my 1 + 1 gets me to 2, I don't care how you do it, but my 1 + 1 gets me to 2.
Look, so even just that alone, the coping, and you remember, it's one thing if you just had one child, but you have 3, 4, 2 different kids in 2 different grades, and switching your mind to cope with that, it's different, very, very different.
Some things that I think I see kind of going in the chat, and let me boil it down. One of the things that makes, I think, therapy such a barrier also for certain persons in any community is the idea that an individual may get to see you. And I'm tying that to what F.L.W. said. One of the best therapeutic measures that we take to avoid distress is the lies that we tell ourselves. Right? I'm going to say it again. One of the best therapeutic measures that we take, right, to make sure that we're okay is found in the lies that we tell ourselves. And if I go to somebody, they may see through one of my lies. And so, nah, let's dead that right there, because that one-to-one relationship reveals some things. And if you're somebody who's gotten into a very intimate personal relationship, you'll see over time how the person will say things about you like, nah, that's not true. Or they see you. They see all of you. And there is some truth to it. And it's an uncomfortable thing to engage in. And that's what therapy does. But let me give you the other side for those out there, because I hope because of our conversation today, whoever watches or rewatches goes and Googles Psychology Today, goes and looks for therapists for Black girls. There's also a therapist for Black men. Yours truly is up on there. Because the benefit of going to somebody whose entire job, whose sole purpose is to see you and not judge you, is the closest thing you may get to what it's like to be with God. So the very thing that we try to use as a coping mechanism, right, that we feel is a barrier, which is our spiritualism, you can kind of get that from somebody here who's opening themselves to say, I'm gonna see you. Yeah, you. Yeah, like I'm gonna say something because it's sort of a potential. I'm gonna see you. It's okay. That's who you are. Great. How are we gonna get to you? How are we gonna get you to be who you want to be? Now, a good therapist, if you show them yourself and they say, and there's something uncomfortable within them, a good therapist will say, hey, you know what? I think I may need to refer you to someone else. Because if I can't take and see you how you are, then I shouldn't be in that relationship with you. And that's something that, again, we go back to this idea of finding a therapist that works for you, like being honest about looking for someone that you can connect with, right? That's why I just want to put that out there.
So I want you to kind of elaborate on that, right? Because I don't want I don't want this conversation to sound like we're dismissing the real experience in terms of sometimes it can be difficult to find a good therapist, right? Mm-hmm. And what that looks like for us. One, how do we seek support when we're going on that journey? And should we seek support when we're going on that journey? Because there are going to be times when you may not find the right therapist within the first 2 tries, right?
Yeah.
How do we build that kind of how do we build up that kind of strength to go again to find a therapist? And what are some things, how can we be responsible for a part of that process in terms of seeking? What are some of the things that we need to look for in seeking a therapist? What are some of the questions that we need to ask our potential clinician or therapist or counselor? Those questions, what are those crucial things that we need to be educated on to look for some basic stuff to kind of help the process go a little bit smoother and would have less impact on us emotionally going through that if we don't find the person right then and there.
I'd love to definitely hear what Natalia and Emily say from the other end. You guys are gonna be therapists, but I'll say one of the first things I say to anyone is do your basic demographic pairing, right? Ask yourself, would you feel more comfortable speaking to a male or a female? Mm-hmm. Okay, and just be honest with yourself about that. And it may not be the obvious gender to gender thing. Like it may be, I think somebody once said, I think I heard somebody once say like, they actually wanted to speak to a male as a female because they like that father figure dynamic. Now, let's not all try to be Freudian out here. That may not mean anything, or it may, but they won't know that until they engage in the process. But if that's going to help them be more open, good for you. So the first thing is be honest about the basic demographics. Do you want a male or a female? Do you want someone's older or younger? Right? Do you someone that is racially aligns with you? For those of you that watch This Is Us, again, I will openly say now on the internet that it is a show that I enjoy. I choose to now watch it. If it comes on the TV, I don't try to pretend to not be watching it. I am now watching it actively. Let's just be honest.
Passion is good for the soul.
And so on that show, I forget his name, Randall, I think, goes through a process of therapy and ends up realizing that like, hey, I don't connect with you and I don't feel comfortable sharing certain things with you because he didn't really consider those basic things. So my first answer, demographics, know your demographics. Next, something important to know is ask questions about how they approach the healing process. Very key. I'm using the word the healing process, the helping process. Ask how they approach it. Listen for some things. Do your own research, but some of the key things, like many therapists now may say the word eclectic, but they still have a root alignment. So some may say, I am cognitive behavioral in approach, which means they're going to be consistently looking for how your thoughts impact your behavior. But others might say they're more Jungian. Oh, Lord Jesus, I didn't take this test in a while. Jungian. I feel like I'm saying that wrong. But there are approaches that talk more about the existential experience in life. There are approaches that maybe look at more your dreams and your sleep that are more psychodynamic in your approach to things. Lexi, you close to the test, girl. I have to remember that since I take it. But ask these questions, and here's the thing, everybody who's watching, who's gonna go back and watch this, and make sure you leave with an understanding of what it means. How are you gonna specifically help me, right? What does that mean? How would that look like in therapy? Oh, okay, thanks, right? If you are spiritual, make sure to ask. I've had people say, hey, are you a Christian? And I say yes, right? Or I'll say for some clients, I'll say yes, but I don't have to bring that into I choose how much to bring my Christian experiences into the therapy process. Mm-hmm. For me, my prayers outside of therapy doesn't have to be prayers in therapy, right? You don't have to know what's going on in my mind. I can be praying the whole time. But ask them, in the chat right now, ask Simone Walton to talk about the speciality. These are different things that you need to understand. And that speciality is what I was talking about. Like, ask them how they approach the healing process. Know those. Those kind of your basics, your demographics, right? And then how they approach healing. You need to, like, once you know those two things, you can begin to lay the groundwork for saying, oh, I might be able to connect with you. Insurance is a base thing too. People understand. Don't be afraid to ask about, do you have a sliding scale, right? Therapy right now is expensive because those who had access to it scaled it up to do so. That's the impact of power and privilege, y'all. Let's just be honest about it. But a lot of therapists do have a sliding scale, do have an approach to say, okay, hey, I can meet you where you are. Let's do this. Or you can decrease the frequency of therapy to, decrease the cost in your pocket. So I think those are some of the things that I tell people, right, and make sure you feel comfortable. Ask as many questions as you need so you feel comfortable. And if you don't feel comfortable, then don't go to that person, or ask more questions. But that's my thing. So I'd love to hear what Natalia and Amleth have to say too.
I mean, for me, you hit pretty much the biggest ones out the ballpark. And I think like after you said that, the next thing is just the vibe, for lack of a better term, that you get when you engage with that person, just like you would for your primary care physicians. I'd even dare say, just like for women who go to see their OBGYN, that can be a very intimate spot. And you don't want to go in with someone that you're feeling, look, I went here and it wasn't comfortable. You go where you're like, okay, do I want, kind of like you said, do I want a female? Do I want a male? But how is this process done? Do I want to come in and we get hit straight to it and we knock it out of the park? Or you have primary care physicians or OBGYNs are like, hey, I haven't seen you in a year. What's been going on? And they know about your family. They know about these things. So it's how do you
touching they doing? They better know.
This is true. But how do you feel comfortable? More than anything else, does it feel like a safe space? And if it doesn't, then you just have to find someone else. And there is going to be someone for you. There definitely is. And then even when it goes to, I think looking for minorities, it can be a little tricky, finding someone. But like you mentioned, Psychology Today, which lists a significant amount of counselors, and Black Therapy, Therapy for Black Girls, which is a podcast that I follow. And like, I was like, oh, wow.
Yep.
Very much so. As well as, for me, there are other people that I follow on Instagram where they'll just put out information. There's several counselors. One that I really like is Nedra Taweb. And there's, Black clinician. And then there's another one, I think it's Liz Listens, and love what she puts out. And there's another, I'll come back to her, but it's like Therapy for Women or something like that. One in particular, that one, I think it's Therapy for Women. She does like TikTok videos, which are really cute. Just she'll say like, this is how you choose for a counselor, asking them, have you taken counseling before? Can you work with someone like me? So whether it's something like, hey, I have a disease and or disorder that greatly impacts how I'm coping, or, for those, and I'm going to say a taboo word here, for those who or associate with the LGBTQ community, like, I know. I know. I gave the disclaimer though, Rob. If that person does not feel comfortable, if that's something that you're going to need to discuss, to be able to say, hey, do you feel comfortable with working with someone who's from that background? Because there are things that might come up are pretty important. So
after Amanda, I want to circle back to that point right there and give a little testimony. Go ahead, Amanda.
That was a good point. So for me, everything that Rob said, but I want to add something from the military perspective, where to me, I would always test people whether they read my charts and whether they really read what I wrote in that chart. And because you know how they do those tests to see what your level is of depression or suicide ideation or all these anxieties and everything. So I always ask them, hey, did you read it? Like, what did you get from that? You know? And I mean, it may come off a little intense, but I am one person where, you know, for me to trust you, I need to know that you are even interested in knowing anything about me. Next, also I wanted to make sure that is this HIPAA protected, or would this get back to my leadership, my command? You know, because there's a lot of people not only in the military, but they work in government jobs or federal jobs, and I think a lot of the stigma is that they don't want that to get back to their upper echelons because it could jeopardize them losing their job. So you want to make sure that you are protecting yourself if you're going to go to therapy and what you say will be confidential. Yes, we do know that if you're of harm to yourself, a child or an elderly person, they would have to, you know, report you. However, still, I'm willing to come to you if it's something I'm really deeply disturbed by, and I need to know your experience. How many years have you had? And what are your credentials? What can you provide me? You know, what services can you provide me at this point that can help with my problem I just came to you about? You know, that's in my charts. So that's how I've always approached them. And some people will probably take it by surprise, and some people will take it willingly and say, okay, this is what I can give to you, you know? And if they're not able to do so, I ask for resources. Who do you know that can help me to further my mental health? Do you recommend anyone in particular?
Amliv, I want to read some things that are in the chat that I see here, some few questions that are asked, and then go to the previous one about LGBTQIA. Here are a few questions. Where did you go to school? What did you study? What makes you qualified to treat my problem? Do you specialize in my problem? What makes you a specialist? Have you helped people like me? What is the typical outcome of those cases? Am I a good fit? And why? What type of treatment styles will you use? Can you explain those treatment styles to me? Will we talk about my family and relationship history? How important is it for you to know about my past? How will therapy is working? Do you give homework? And there are so many. If you're, please check out the chat. Those questions to me are somewhat been asked to what you feel comfortable. Like these type of questions are from people who probably wanted to know something because that was a place that they might have been a little uncomfortable about. And so like, hey, let me see what you do. Even the experience thing, I want to say that's very true. I also want to say what I love about my profession is that no clinician is ever alone. Like before I start running on my own, I'm running with somebody else. So experience may not always be, I'm just trying to look out for these young counselors and their coins. But usually all counselors, until they are independently licensed, are licensed or are under a supervision of someone else. So somebody is working with them as they go through cases. So they're never entirely alone. And I want to be very transparent about the LGBTQIA as a therapist now who would be open to working with that population. That wasn't a place that I always existed in. Wasn't. And in fact, I was like, oh, I'm going to be referring out to do that, which was the healthy and right thing for me to do. Which is why when you bring it up, Natalia, it's important to ask the specific questions. Be very clear about what it is that you are dealing with and if they're going to be okay with that. Because if they're not, I pray that they are honest with themselves and being a good therapist to say, okay, well, you know what? Hey, let me refer you to such and such a person because I think they'll be able to better help you. You got to ask the difficult questions and you got to make sure that you're comfortable.
And I want to acknowledge that when even if you should have certain criteria for your clinicians who you're seeking, but also understanding that you may not find everything, right? So like Rob talks about him now after his own self-development and his own exploring himself, he's now able to be open and taking on somebody in the LGBTQIA community. So if someone comes in and say, hey, what's your experience, right? Is the clinician, one, do they show competent enough to educate themselves, and has do they show the ability to be open to your issues that you're bringing to the table, right? And not necessarily like, oh well, he's never seen somebody before who has been in the LGBT community, so let me just cancel that off, right? So there are certain things that you may need to make sure that are core things for you and are non-negotiables, but also some things may be things that um, we can see how this works, and if it doesn't work, then I can find another clinician, right? So I just want to remind everybody in the that who is watching us via YouTube or Facebook, that we are going to switch over in a few seconds to the overflow. So if you want to join us for this conversation and kind of just share with us your thoughts on this process of seeking therapy, and what's it been like for you, and even just any advice for anybody out there who is on this journey right now, they may feel discouraged, just click on the link in the chat. It's in the YouTube chat. So we look forward to seeing and chatting with you. Is it now, Rob, or are we going to wait a few? Okay, so see y'all over there. Any moment. Okay, are we back? Yep.
Sorry, you can't hear me because I'm on mute, but yeah.
Yeah, I could. This is why people don't believe that we're introverts, Rob, because we act cool on these platforms, and people don't think we're an introvert. It's okay. It's just for a moment, guys.
It truly is. It is truly but for anyway. Stop. Let's go. See, they got some people on here.
Thank you guys for joining. I see Simone and Erin. You guys joined us for the conversation. So I want to kind of just hear what you guys.
We live on YouTube. What y'all hiding from? You know we got people.
I know. Come show your beautiful faces. I know you. I know your faces, your smiles. So we want to see them. If you're able to, anyway. There's someone else. Erin, where's your pretty smile?
Love you guys. That's all I have to give. That's all.
Huh?
She said something clowning. Don't worry about it. Ask a question.
Okay. So Simone, your thoughts on just what we've been talking about and what you can share with us. If y'all don't know.
Yeah, give her titles now. She don't work hard, okay? Years for these.
Dr. Simone.
Dr. Simone.
Come on now.
She killed, the pavement getting this degree. So we will acknowledge that. What is it, like 3 or 2% of people get a whole 2% get a whole PhD? Okay, so props. What are your thoughts about this conversation and about seeking therapy and what that has been like, just in general, and also for this year for COVID?
Kudos to you guys for having the conversation. It's very important. So Rob has heard me say this several times. Mental health should be normalized. If someone has diabetes or high cholesterol, right, no one vilifies them for doing that. They go to a primary care physician, and the primary care physician may say, you need to look at your diet, you need to exercise, you need to maybe minimize the stress in your life. It may be one or a combination of those things. The same thing with emotional health. Every year, I think just as people get their annual physicals, ladies, you get your OB checkups. Gentlemen, you should get your prostate check. Yes, Black men, you need to especially get it done. and you need to be getting it done earlier, sooner rather than later, right? So not at 50, not at 40, especially if you have a family history, you should really start those things like in your 30s. For some of you, even 20s, depending on your family's history, right? So get an emotional health checkup, right?
Okay.
Mean that you're, people try to use these words like, oh, I'm not crazy. I don't need to talk to anybody. I'm not crazy. No.
I be owning my crazy.
Right? People don't go like, no. It's so important. And especially in this time of COVID, I think what COVID has done is because people have to kind of sit with themselves, they are grappling with, there's not that busyness. One of you were talking about keeping busy, right? You don't have all these things to fill your time and fill your day. And even if there's a lot going on for everyone, which there is, you're sitting in the comfort of your own home or the discomfort of your own home, depending on your situation, and you're being forced to deal with it. So therapists, we're hearing a lot more from a lot of people. We're hearing from people of all ages. Even parents are realizing, oh, wow, I might need to seek some support for my kid. And thankfully, we're hearing more from people in our community. In Black and Brown communities, there's still huge stigma around seeking mental health support. And it is really up to the community to help to normalize that. And leading that charge are social workers, psychologists, right? All of us have to be leading that charge to really educate our community. And it is so important. So kudos to you guys for having the conversation.
Thanks for being on here, Doc.
Yeah.
Thank you. Erin, you want to add anything? I don't want to.
Sorry. Oh, so sorry. I know. I mean, it's okay. We didn't know. Sorry. We were just saying that like this is a great conversation to have. But of course, me and my thought process, like, who is this reaching? I wish that we could have got maybe like some promo from, I don't know, the pastor on this conversation. Maybe have like other people really talk about, hey, F.L.O.W is doing something about mental health. If you don't know what mental health is, come to this thing called Triggered, Like, I feel really bad to say that because I'm not saying you guys aren't reaching anybody, because you are. Like, there were, what's it called? Me and Kat looked up Black therapy for Black girls. They didn't take our insurance, not gonna lie to you, but that's okay. That is okay, all right? We found this other lady on the Psychology Today. We might have to save some pennies to reach her and in the future, but but it was
scale support. You got it.
Thank you. But yeah, so I think you guys reached a lot of people today, but I still think that if we're gonna talk about like that it needs to be supporting the church, we need to get people who are in power to support things like this. And I know this is the last thing we have, but of course this is on YouTube, it's recorded, forever. Etched in our minds or whatever. So I think maybe like getting people in the church, like Pastor Ken Locke, to promote stuff like this, that help people understand that, like, if a pastor is saying I should do this, he also thinks that it is valuable. Like, mental health is important. Because a lot of people are like, well, what did the pastor say? Like, he prayed over me last week. I go to his counseling all the time. Like, they're not going to see that there are counselors in the church that actually, that's their sole job as well. And so, yes, hand raised. I'm not a teacher.
I actually want to be specific in defending specifically Pastor Kilnock and Pastor Smith, because they have advocated and they do advocate for mental health.
Okay.
So and just now, I think your point is larger than our specific church. I am not trying to in any way.
And she was talking specifically to this too, also, just to say that.
But I think it's a larger issue, right? Like, when people in power speak to that, some people feel connected. But let me say what I believe F.L.O.W is about, and I want to and make it clear, okay, very clear. F.L.O.W is about changing spaces, shaping spaces, or creating spaces. We don't need no one to validate our voice. It's valid the way it is, right? So, Erin, I want to find a balance in your point, right? In this idea of like, yes, it's nice to have people affirm, people in power who have power to affirm the things that are right and good. But you know what? If we continue to wait for that, sometimes we miss out. And in the meantime, I know myself, Dr. Simone, Alexia are looking at people who are waiting for the pastor to say something. And while we're trying to get to them, they're dying on the inside, or they're suffering. And we're like, nope, let me just use my voice. Let me share it. Let me make sure there's a show that's happening today where we talk about it. So you know, and now you have already done an amazing step. And the general you, and you specifically, you and Kat, by already reaching out, looking for a support, that already has changed a space. You're already prepared to shape other spaces, because now you can talk about it. And I don't want to lose sight. I know time is going, and I want to speak to our Black men, our Black men. This panel is predominated right now by coincidence, majority women. Therapy is, when it is sought out, is more readily sought out by women. But yet we still got brothers shooting brothers, brothers raping brothers, brothers raping women, brothers waking children, brothers depressed, brothers drunk, brothers sexing, brothers like these are the things that are results of poor mental health. Call a spade a spade. And so as a brother, as a man, it's okay to seek therapy, right? I am out here, like I said, I'm really excited. I'm on Therapist for Black Men now. Like, go and find a brother who's want to listen to you, or a sister, whoever. You know, we talk about these questions, go it out, because we are killing ourselves and our community by not looking for and looking for and being willing to reach out for support and help. And as a result, we are dying trying to be strong, right? Like, how strong are you? But you dead on the inside, cuz like, you can't even handle a woman telling you you're not good enough. And how strong are you really if you can't take a little insult? Like, because babies do that. Babies don't get what they want and they fall out. Like, I'm just trying to speak to things that men sometimes on the inside are like, but I got this. But you can't. You can't even take a little critique. You fall out.
I want to speak to Erin's point also, just real quick, to validate also the idea of when we're not only keeping ourselves accountable for help change in that space, because we're like, even though like we're F.L.O.W here, we're like, we should consider ourselves like little F.L.O.Ws in our own, you know, spaces as we go out, right? So I agree in terms of keeping everybody around us accountable, right? Whether it's our friend or teacher or our doctors or our pastors or worship lead, whatever, keeping everyone accountable to, like Dr. Simone said, normalizing the conversations, keeping them accountable to make sure that those conversations are a part of other conversations that we have regularly. So I do want to acknowledge that from Erin. Hey, Arthur, thank you for joining us. I know, Natalia, you had something that you wanted to add, and then we can jump right to it.
I forgot to share this, and Erin kind of brought it up in regards to finding resources for counseling. And one of the things I wanted to bring up was that a lot of times universities, if they're teaching clinicians, they also give the opportunity for a cheaper charge because they're practicing and need persons, but also it's a way for you to still get that, as well as there's certain community programs that are around. I know in Alabama, Huntsville specifically, there's a program called Thrive that offers it. Grant you have to get the primary care physician first and for them to send you out to get counseling, but they offer sliding scales. So, you know, searching in your particular community to see if that's an option. And even group therapy, you might not be able to sit one-on-one, but group therapy a lot of times will be significantly cheaper than one-on-one as you're trying to find, and sometimes as you're trying to find a resource. And sometimes in group therapy, you might get everything, and or you might find other resources that are going to be beneficial for you. And even going back to, you know, social media platforms, a lot of persons who offer businesses are on different social media platforms. One of the ones that's been beneficial for me in learning more has been Instagram. And I mentioned, you know, like Nedra Taweb and Liz Listens and Therapy for Women have been really great ones that I've really like, you know, tapped into and thought their information that they put out was really beneficial. And even if not what they're saying, but it led me to understand the persons that are in my circles better, and how to navigate them, and even just resources and how to get things figured out. So.
And you now have Dr. Simone Walton. You now have Alexia Scott Mitchell. You now have Rob Harris. All right, go ahead, Arthur. Just had to throw that in.
Y'all, I'm just sitting here taking notes. And thank you guys so much for all of the information and the work that you guys are doing. I just wanted to have a question for the professionals on the line. I know that there are many questions that you can ask um, to, like, for your comfortability, like to know like if the person was well trained or well experienced, or however you want to say, for whatever needs that you need. But I just wanted to know, for the viewer's perspective, are there different questions that you should ask at certain stages? So there's like before the consultation, there's like during the consultation, there's like during like the first session, after like the first few weeks. Like, should there be like certain questions that you should ask at certain stages with your with your early, experience with the therapist?
I'll start off by saying that's a dope question. Experientially, the questions that I commonly get throughout the process, early on, it's I don't feel like it's working. Is it working? It's something that I like you typically feel. And it's like, yeah, like let's trust the process, because the early parts of it is like a relationship. You're just talking, and you may not feel like we're talking about deep stuff, but the clinician may actually be gathering information, but they also want to get to know you. So that's a common question that I think you can ask, like, hey, how do you feel like we're going? It is a relationship. You are actively a part of this relationship. You can ask that. The other question that I think you can ask, or I've heard asked too throughout the process, is should I feel so tired? Like, should I feel so fatigued after? I literally had a client like say, like, honestly, this is probably, I feel more exhausted after our sessions than I do going through the workday. And what I had to say to that client, who was still with me, still rocking it out, is like, yeah, because we're doing a lot of like physical work is exhausting. Mental work is exhausting. And so you can ask your clinician, like, should you feel this way? Because also, depending on your presenting problems, that could be good information. Like any questions about maybe changing in sleep habits and things, particularly if you may be on medication, these are things that can inform the therapist to like, okay, no, this is a natural part of the process, or hey, we need to consider what's happening there. So Arthur, I would say throughout the process, just asking checkup questions like, hey, how you do you think that things are going well? And they may not be so forthright, like you're doing great, but they will be able to maybe alleviate any concerns or yeah, I would say concerns that you may have about where you are in that process so far.
Thank you.
Dr. Simone, Alexia? Yeah.
No, I think Rob did a great job in covering it. What I will add, and I'll give you all a little therapeutic secret that I use with my clients. And I got this, I credit one of my mentors for teaching me this. And it's especially been really great during the virtual time, right? I ask my clients, I say, where are you? Mm-hmm. Now, depending on the day, I get a different response. In the beginning of a relationship, right? I'm getting to know the person, they're getting to know me, and I say, where are you? Right? Alexia may respond, I'm sitting in my living room. Right. Okay. But as we move along in our relationship, and maybe even the next time, maybe even at our fourth session, I say, where are you? She now also knows that goes beyond just the physical where she is. Emotionally, where is she at, right? So she may say, I'm in a dark place. And I say, okay, take me to that place. And we may go there together. Or she may say, I don't want to be in this dark place. And I'll say, well, where would you like to go? And we'll go there together. The thing about a therapeutic relationship is it's very important, right? As clinicians, we let our clients, they lead the way. Yeah. So I accompany people on a journey. It's your journey. Where do you need to go? Where do you want to go? Now, believe it or not, along the journey, right, I'm a guide. So we're walking down and I may point out something. I may say, you just shared something about, you're in a dark place. Have you been in that place before? right? So and either you want to stay there or you want to move to another place. So it's like we are walking on a journey together. I am walking alongside you. I'm not leading you. I'm not behind you. I'm literally next to you on that journey, and you are taking me along. You are showing me what's going on in your mind emotionally, either what you're grappling with, maybe also past traumas that you've experienced, maybe where you are right then at that point, right? Maybe where you envision yourself in the future. This is your process.
Yeah. So,
Simone,
right?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's your journey. So most important, I think I would say, Arthur, figure out what it is that you need and what it is that you want.
And that is like you and Rob kind of really nailed it. But I want to highlight and really hone in on the whole this is your journey, your transparency and your willingness to be fully present in that journey. It's up to you, right? So as much as with the expertise that we have, and we may gather all these information, and even the example like Dr. Simone gave, depends on what you choose. If you want to acknowledge the darkness or move on, we're gathering information, but we can't make you do any particular thing in those moments. So your full attention to your process is what will make the process work, the therapy work. Because it's if you're not participating fully and you're feeling like, oh, I don't want to share this, or I want to hold this back, those are hindrance that the counselor or clinician can't necessarily remove out of it, because everything depends on you and how you want to kind of have the flow go. So we're, like she said, we're on the journey with you, but it's how you deal with the process. It determines how the session ends or the process ends. So
I wanted to
sorry, Rob.
I wanted to share, Arthur, and to everyone out there watching, also be honest with what type of therapy you want, because some people come wanting to be told. Cultures, I mean, we've studied this. There are cultures who actually go to a therapist and they're expecting to be told exactly what is going to happen. They're expected to be told what to do and where to go. Your experience, your professional, your growing therapist will be able to work with you on that. And that's something I think you bring to the table and say, hey, I'm looking for a little bit more guidance. I'm looking for a little bit more direction. Because, for example, maybe therapists like those on the call right now may say, okay, well, I prefer to walk with my clients. I prefer to actually let them guide. At least that's what you're looking for. You can then say, okay, I'll try that, or I'm not. But I think that's an honest question also to ask. And this is a very, very big topic. We got 2 minutes left on our show time. So I want to make sure, one, to thank the moderator, Alexia. I want to thank Natalia for being with us throughout the series, Amliv, Dr. Simone. We always appreciate you, F.L.O.W family. So thank you for coming on and sharing your nuggets. Also, everyone, Dr. Simone Walton does have a private practice. We support all Black business out here. So I'm not gonna say if you need a friend, but if you know a friend, you know a friend. You know what I'm saying? Like, help us out. You know what I'm saying? We all got bills to pay. Okay, let's keep it real. I also
just real quick, give it just a tool or just a suggestion for this. Even though I'm not into Christmas, but if we're giving gifts, we might want to consider giving a therapy session.
Come on now, somebody. Let's go. That's how F.L.O.W does it. And maybe, not even maybe, I have to talk to my team. I can't say things all left. But let's talk in the new year, right? F.L.O.W is an active space of young adults. Maybe you think we should have a mental health fund, like a mental health grant that we can provide persons, because we believe it's important. So something to consider in the future. But what's the connection, right? That's my job, apparently. What's the connection? So I want to point out 2 scriptures for you. They should be popping up here in a second. The first one, Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Let's keep it honest. A therapist does exactly that, and a good community should do that as well. If you feel as though there is no one in your community that is able to do that with you, then you might need to seek out a mental health professional to help you get to a place where you feel comfortable to engage with your community. We are helping professionals. We help in your healing process. And sometimes you may not be able to find it in your community at large, so you may need to seek someone out. Don't be afraid to do so, because I look here at the scripture and it kind of lets us know that we ought to do that. All right, next scripture. Also, we who are strong have an obligation to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. I feel like that scripture speaks for itself, okay? If you have gone through therapy, I'm gonna put it a different way. If you have gone through therapy, if you've experienced that process, if you know how much you were helped and healed from it, then you now are someone stronger in that process. And hey, the scripture says you have an obligation to bear with the failings of the weak. I will take that and say, I'll extrapolate it, right? I will be exegetal and say, go out and encourage someone else to seek that process. Go out and encourage someone else to look into how they can heal themselves and get to where you are, right? This isn't just about saying, well, now I'm better, I'm gonna go about my life. No, 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 no. You've been opened to a resource and to a process that is helpful and healing. And just like you shouldn't and you wouldn't suppress the light of Christ, you should not suppress any light that he has given you to shine on someone else's situation. So as we move into our new year, right, Flow is all about shaping spaces, right, changing spaces and creating spaces. And this is what we do. We're about that life. If you are a young adult, anywhere between 22 and we actually, literally, I was told the other day, 40. So that gives us all a good span, right? Be a part of our spaces. Be a part of our spaces because we care for you. We care about your thoughts, your experiences, your feelings, and we want to grow with you, right? And see you grow in that process. So thank you all. We've given 2 minutes extra. I love y'all. Peace out. Be blessed. Stay healthy and have a happy and very, 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 very safe holiday, right? Wear your mask, wash your hands. It's real. All right. Have a good day.